This is the Creative Market Free Goods Roundup for the week of January 4th, 2016, and that makes this the first free goods of the year, and that's a pretty cool thing. So this week we have 6 different free goods, but they are free this week only. So if you see an item you like when you watch this video, check out the description of this video, which is just below the video itself, where you'll find links to download each one of these 6 different free items. So first up here is Halftone Textures Volume 1. This is a collection of 8 different halftone textures in Photoshop format, and they do include fully transparent textures. They have a background on them by default, but you can turn that off. So they should be very easy for you to apply, and I'll show you how to do that in just a second here. If I go to image and image size on these are 5400 by 7200 pixels, so they should be plenty big for pretty much anything you want to use them on the web for, or most print applications, stuff like t-shirts and the like. These should be big enough to do that. Now I'll just zoom in a little bit closer here so you can see what these textures actually look like up close. So this right here is 100%, so you can really see that halftone texture taking effect and a lot of the different variations on that texture. I'll just zoom out a little bit more here, and as you can kind of get a better idea of some of the subtle variations that go on throughout this entire texture. So it isn't just a flat half-toned texture, there is a lot of variation here. And here is the second one, and all these different 8 ones do have different visual characteristics for you to kind of pick from and use. So you can pick the ones that make the most sense for your project and the type of look you're going for. As you can tell, this texture right here has a lot more dark areas that the previous ones did not. So if you're looking for some that are much more impactful in their appearance, those are certainly included in this as well. And this one right here is a much lighter one with nice light sections in the center, or if you don't want to remove too much from your work in terms of the texture you apply, this one would be a really good fit for that. And this one has some kind of cool scratching or linear marks on it that kind of set it apart from the previous ones. And here's another one that starts up pretty light up at the top, but then has a darker fade as you go down. Whoops, I don't want to move that away. So that's kind of a neat effect on this particular texture. And there is some really neat halftone effects going on here as I zoom in a little bit closer. So this is 100%, so you can really get a good idea of how this halftone texture looks. And this one in particular really shows off some of the cooler characteristics of that. And here's the 7th one, which is a super light texture. So once again, if you want a very light effect, especially on stuff like text, I find textures like this to work the best because they don't take up too much letters, so letters are still very legible, and yet they have a really cool appearance once you actually knock out this texture. And for this final one here, I'll quickly show you how you can apply this to an element of your choice. There's a million different methods of doing this, but I'll just show you one very easy one. So I have my logo on a layer right here, and I went ahead and just plopped this inside this Photoshop document. So you can either copy and paste your stuff in, or go to File, Place, or actually create your artwork inside the Photoshop document to start. And the texture is actually on top of it right now, but if I want to, let's say, just select this texture and apply it to my logo without actually removing stuff from it, so I don't have to go in and redo things if I end up not liking the texture, if I want to quickly remove it. If you, let's say, delete the texture out, that can be a pain if you want to fix things up later. So what I'm going to do is just, with this texture layer selected right here, I'm going to hold down Control on a PC or Command on a Mac and click it once, and you can tell it worked because there's a bunch of different little selection dots moving around here. I think they call them marching ants. And then you can go ahead and turn off the visibility of that texture by clicking the eyeball icon, and then just select the layer that you want to apply this texture to. So in this case, it's my logo right here, and at the bottom here there's a rectangle with a circle through it called Add Layer Mask. Just click that once, and it will go ahead and apply that texture onto the work that you applied it to, or I should say onto the layer that you applied it to. And if you want to give yourself some even more visual variation with these, select the layer mask that you created, so it's just to the right of the actual layer thumbnail. So just click on that and then hit Control I on a PC or Command I on a Mac to invert that texture, which will sort of give every texture in this pack a secondary look. But that's it for this texture pack. It's a pretty cool one with some really nice halftone effects. If I zoom in a little bit closer here on this logo, you can see how this takes effect and how it looks when I invert that, which is a very different look indeed. But if you think these are cool and you have some projects in mind where you think these might be useful in the future, just be sure to pick this one up this week while it's still free. Next up is Mini Font Bundle. This is actually a really large font collection, so there are 11 different fonts included in total, and they include these in both OpenType as well as TrueType font format. So instead of showing all the letters of all these different fonts, which would take a really long time, I just typed out Free Goods Roundup here so you can see how each font looks typed out into a sentence, and then you can kind of decide which of these fonts you think you'll find the most useful, or if there's any of these that you actually want to go in there and use. So up at the top here we have the first font, and this one is called DubBub. And this is a very cartoony font, which I think has a pretty cool appearance to it. So very hand-drawn looking. And as you can see, the capital letters, just for reference, the first letter of each word is capitalized, and then the other ones are always lowercase. So that's just the general rule of how I typed all these out. So the capitals in this one are fully filled in, and the lowercases have this cool wave-like effect inside of them. The one below that, we have a font called End to End that has a really nice 3D effect to it with these lines right here. And below that, we have a font called Fizzle Bottom. So once again, very hand-drawn looking. Pretty much all these have an extremely hand-drawn looking appearance to them. This font right here is called Forfty, and the one below that is called Forfty Scribble. So the main difference between these two different fonts is the Scribble has a scribbled in fill to it, where the standard Forfty does not have a fill at all. Below that, we have a font called Gab. Once again, a really cool look on this one, a very nice looking serif that has a vintage appearance to it. Below that, we have the font right here called Peebo. So as you can see right here, the capital letters have this dotted fill to them, where the lowercase letters do not. So you can kind of pick how you want this to look by using either capitals or lowercase letters as you're typing this out. Right here, we have a really nice looking font called Quick and Dirty. So very hand-drawn looking, a very nice serif font right here with some nice accent marks, but it's still extremely legible and very clear and easy to read, which I think is a nice part of this particular one. Below that, we have this font called The Right Stuff. So the difference here, the capital letters have this dotted fill to it. This sort of striped look actually is probably a better way of saying it, where the lowercase letters do not. And below that, we have the font called Torple. Once again, hand-drawn looking, very tall font in its appearance, and overall just a pretty fun font to look at. And here is the last of the bunch called 2N2. So lowercase letters have a white fill where the uppercase or capital letters have a black fill, and then they just alternate where the uppercase letters will have white highlights and the lowercase letters will have black highlights. But that's it for this pack. There are 11 different fonts in total, so for this particular free item, you're getting a lot of free stuff. So if you like fonts that are pretty fun to look at and extremely hand-drawn looking in their appearance, then this pack might be a great one for you to pick up. Just be sure to grab this one this week while it's still free. Next, we have Launch, which is a WordPress theme. This is a blogger theme for WordPress, so if you like the WordPress content management system, then this one will be up your alley. And as you can see right here, I'm recording this on a 1440p screen, by the way. The way it handles the content is that it decides the content window, which is basically this left sidebar, and then the actual post content will always be centered, and then it just adds space to the left and the right of it to make sure that this remains centered. So because of that, this left sidebar here tends to get pushed into the mid-center of the window here with a lot of space off to the left, especially on larger screens. So that is something to kind of keep in mind with this particular theme, where you could go in here afterwards if you feel comfortable with coding and try to set this left sidebar to always be pushed up all the way to the left. I try to very quickly do that through the inspect editor, but it will take a little bit more time than what I was thinking. So just kind of keep note of that if this large space of kind of blank area bothers you. But this is a really cool theme because it does offer support for stuff like self-hosted audio and self-hosted video, as well as embedded audio or video if you want to host that content on Vimeo or YouTube or SoundCloud, whatever your particular hosting place of choice is. And as you can see here, it is very nicely grouped with these little icons off to the left here of the actual content that lets you know what piece of content is what. So a video has a little film strip, and a quote will have a little quotation sign. So I think that's a really nice little addition here to make things look that much more customized and easy to navigate if you're a person going through this website. I'll just open up an individual post here so we can check that out. So we have an image up at the top here with plenty of room for type below it. And then there's also a comment section below it, which is a huge plus for using WordPress. So that should be very easy for people to go in there and use. And there's some different links here. Up the top, we have a search bar so people can search content on the site. There's an archives template. So if you want to easily archive your various content, you can do that right here. There's a bunch of shortcodes, which are things like shortcuts for buttons or tabs or anything like that that you want to use, including things like a bunch of different column layouts. So there's quite a bit of diversity in the way you can lay out your text here. And this is the contact form, very typical name, email, message, and then send email. Below that, we have a tag cloud, a Flickr widget built in, as well as a social widget with a bunch of different social plugins, as you can see right here. So that pretty much wraps this theme up. The only other thing I thought I should mention is that this theme is responsive in terms of at least it will respond to much larger windows. As you can see, it's doing on my screen right here. but when I shrunk it down really small, basically the only thing that showed up was this sidebar. So if you are using this on, let's say, a smaller phone screen, you might run into some issues because of that, but it should look really good on any larger screen or tablet. Anything basically tablet or above, I think you'll be totally fine. But that's it for this theme. If you like what you see and you really want to post up your own content, especially stuff like video and audio, then this one might be a really good starting place for you to go in there and do that. And if that's something you're interested in doing, just be sure to pick this one up this week. Next up is hand-drawn Sunburst. This is a collection of 4 hand-drawn starbursts in Illustrator, EPS, and then transparent background PNG format. I think the Illustrator and EPS files will be the most usable because they are vector and therefore infinitely scalable, but if you want to use the PNG, you can certainly go in there and do that. So to use these, just grab which one of the starbursts you want to pull off to the side here and then bring it into the document of your choice. So I'll just quickly move these off to show one other kind of cool thing with this, in that there is this sort of speckled background included as well that you could also use as a background or as a texture, sort of as you see fit, depending on how you want to go in there and use that. But I'll just zoom in a little bit closer on these starbursts so you can get a good idea of what they look like up close. As you can see, the lines have a slight wavering appearance to them that gives them that handmade look. So I think it does pull that off pretty decently here. So these are probably actually hand drawn and then perhaps scanned in and vectorized after the fact. If I zoom in really close here, you can see some of the little speckles that occur because of that process. And I'll just check out the other 2 on the right side here really quick so you can get a good idea of what these look like. So they all are fairly similar in their appearance, and yet they are different. So if you want some variation in your starbursts, you can use which one of these 4 that you think will work best. And like I said before, there is this cool background or texture, however you want to use it in your case, that is also included inside this file, so that's pretty cool as well. But that's it for this pack. It's a nice and simple thing. If you're looking for some vector starbursts, then this is something you'll probably want to pick up. Just be sure to grab it this week while it's still free. Next up is Duotone Photoshop Actions. This is a collection of Photoshop actions, so to use these inside Photoshop, first make sure you go to Window and then have Actions opened up at the top. So here is my Actions window, and then using the drop down lines up at the top right corner here, you can click that, and then you can go over to Load Actions, sort of near the middle of the window here. That might vary a little bit for you, and then just select that and then go into the folder that you downloaded and then open up the .atn file, which I think is in a folder called Actions. Alternatively, you can go inside that Actions folder and just double click on the .atn file, and that'll usually load it up in Photoshop for you. But once you do that, there are 33 different actions in total here, so there are a ton of different actions to go in and use. So let's just go in and test them on this image from unsplash.com right here, which should give you a decent idea of what to expect. I think I opened something like 15 of the 33 in total. So I'm just going to flip these on and off so you can kind of get a good idea of what you can expect here. So as you can see, these are very powerful effects in that they really overlay colors on top of the image and vastly change the color characteristics. So if you're looking for a really subtle color action set, then this one might not be quite right for you. But if you're looking for something that's very powerful and bold in the way it goes over your images, or even stuff like illustrations or design, sometimes photo actions can look really cool overlaid on top of the illustration or a different design you're working on if you want to give it some cool color effects. So don't be afraid to test these actions on stuff like that as well. You might get some really cool effects because of that. But as you can see, some of these too will actually use multiple different colors. So like this one previously right here uses almost a magenta color and then this cyan blue on this particular image, where some of the previous ones would really, well, that was actually another example of that, but this one right here is more of a generic color overlay of a singular color. So that is a kind of interesting effect that you can get using these different actions as you apply them on top of your photos. And of course, different actions will look better on different photos depending on how the color overlay works on that particular image. So feel free to test all these different actions out as you go through and run them. And by the way, if you're not sure how to run them, I should probably show that quick. Make sure your actions window's open up that Duotone by Skybox, just click on the action you want to run, and they are labeled by what kind of color they're going to actually apply on here. So if I go down right here, there's this one called light bright blue. Just click on that and then hit the play button. It'll very quickly run that action over the photo. So in this case, it doesn't look too great on this particular photo because this photo is so white, but it is very quick to go in here and just click the action you want to run, hit the play button, and then as you can see, it very quickly applies it to the image or design or illustration, whatever you happen to be placing it on. But that's it for this action set. Remember, I only showed a few of these. There are 33 in total, so if you liked what you saw, just be sure to pick up the entire pack so you can test them all out. But if you do want to do that, just be sure to grab them this week while they're still free. And last up is Texty Photoshop Effect. So this is a Photoshop document that does this pretty cool 3D text extrusion and drop shadow for you. Now let's go to image size here to see how big it is. So it's 1200 by 1200 pixels. So it's going to be big enough for most things on the web, but if you actually want to print these out, it might be a little bit small for that. And the way this actually works is very simple. So up at the very top here, there's a smart object layer. So to place your own stuff in here in case you want to flip this out, just double click on that smart object layer, which will bring you into this new window with the word Texty pre-written out. So I could highlight this and change this to something different. Whoops, I don't have this font installed, so it's freaking out a little bit. But I could change this to cat and then use that if I wanted to. But in this case, I just dropped my own logo in here by copying and pasting it from Illustrator. Alternatively, you can go to File and then place embedded or place linked. It doesn't really matter. And place your work in there or duplicate it from within Photoshop, or even make the stuff in this window if you want to work with that instead. The important thing is once your work is in here and ready to go, you just hit Control S on a PC or Command S on a Mac to save it, and then go ahead and close this window. So as you can see right here, it automatically applied this pretty cool effect to my logo, and that was super fast and easy to do. So it is just this one singular effect, but it does a very nice job of pulling that off. And to change the color of the text fill, or in this case logo fill, just open up this folder called text fill, and then we have something called text stroke, which if I turn off, you can tell is just this outer stroke right here. And then you have the text inner shadowing. But what really matters here is this one called text fill color. So just double click on this color box, and then I'll make this something like a blue color instead. So you can go ahead and change the overall fill color of this if that's something you want to do. And if you want to change the actual fill inside here, that's a little bit more tricky, but still not too hard. Use the layer called text fill right here inside the text fill folder, and you want to double click on the bevel and emboss effect right here. And under shadow mode near the bottom, you can see this color is set to orange right now. Just click that, and then you can go ahead and change the color of this to be something different if you want to go ahead and do that. If you make the overall lines right here a substantially different color, you'll probably want to do that just so this thing looks a little bit better. And below the text extrusion folder, there's a layer called texture, which is just this background texture that you can turn on or off. And below that, there's a layer that just contains this type that says Photoshop 3D effect, kind of showing that you can place your own type that doesn't have the effect applied onto it. If you want to do that inside here, just place it in roughly this spot. If you don't want to use that, you can either turn that off or delete that layer entirely. Below that, we have another one where you can change the color of this drop shadow fill. So just double click on this, and then you can go ahead and change the drop shadow fill color. It takes a little bit of time to apply since it's doing some work, but it is very easy to go in there and do that. Alternatively, you can just turn off this folder called shadow if you don't want that drop shadow there. I think it looks kind of nice actually applied to this, but that's up to you how you want to use it. But that's it for this Photoshop document. If you're looking for a very easy way to add a 3D extrude and drop shadow to either text or a logo or a simple silhouette, then this thing might come in really handy for you. But if you have some ideas in mind where you think this one might be useful, just be sure to grab it this week. So that's it for this week's free goods, and do remember they are free this week only. So if you saw something you might have use for, just hop on down to the description of the video where you'll find a link to download it. And as always, if you found this video helpful, please like and favorite. And if you want to see this video every week, please subscribe. This video is released every Monday till you know it's free this week on Creative Market. Thanks for watching.